everyone, it's JP from A Couple of Dabblers, and today I'm going to be showing you a little project that I'm working on for a game called Kings of War. So that's part of a little background for what I'm actually doing today. So what I'll be trying to make is a multi-base with an ice kind of look to it. And so the reason I'm doing this is because in Kings of War, the way you play the game is you have your units, your blocks of troops, and you put them all together on a single base to make it easier to move them around, because the unit moves around together and when it dies you take them all off, so it's easy. Now, since you have this capability to put them onto this one big base, you can spend a lot of time trying to make that base a bit more interesting, and that's called multi-basing, which I'm just getting into. Now, the look I'm going for with these bases is I kind of want a frozen wasteland, like there was something here and it was all frozen. And it just kind of came to me because I have been playing quite a bit of Witcher, and in The Witcher, you know, whenever the wild hunt turns up, everything freezes. You know, suddenly whole villages are frozen underneath a layer of ice. And so I was kind of thinking of that look. And so that's where I started looking up different ways. And that was my first idea, but I thought, oh, this is too hard. But then my wife, Floz, she then actually suggested completely separately to try out an ice effect. She thought, well, wouldn't that be cool? So I had two different reasons to try it out, and then I just so happened to just look it up to see how hard is it. And I found this tutorial online on a forum, which I will link below, and I have to say it's actually not as hard as it looked. Now, the only problem was that this tutorial was for a single 28mm base. So this is a round base with round edges, and all they had to do was kind of cut out the center of the base, leaving the rim, and then they could kind of build that up inside that small area, and it worked very well for that. But I was wondering, can this then be expanded to a larger base, something that's, say, 10 centimeters in width rather than just 28mm? And so that's where I've started to experiment with this. Now, I've already done it once with a slightly smaller base, and this is my first time doing it with what is called a regiment-sized base for this game. So I'll be showing you in this video all the different steps to get up to that point where you have the ice done. And then I'll show you what it looks like at the end with my models put on top, so you can see what a multi-base for Kings of War tends to look like.
So the first step is to get your base prepped. So you get your multi-base, or even your small base, and you will put down all the features that you want to be part of the terrain inside the ice, and get them all laid out, get it undercoated, so that's what's here, so this is all undercoated, and get it all set up so that when you put down that polyurethane, you will have it all pre-painted and it'll look trapped under the ice, because once that, essentially it's a varnish, is put down, it's all stuck there. So you want to make it painted. You don't need to paint it to an amazing quality because the polyurethane does tend to obscure the details a bit, so just get the colors down, maybe put in a wash. You don't have to go crazy for highlighting and stuff. And so, for instance, we got here, you saw in the last one there was some trapped elf bits underneath to look like elves trapped under there. So now we're here, we've got a fallen elf underneath this tree. So he'll be painted moderately well. I'll instead put more effort in, say, to the these little imps, these demons that are standing on the ruins in the tree, because that's what people are going to look at. And so we've got all these other things. So don't put in too much effort when you're doing this kind of ice basing technique, because you won't be able to see it so clearly under the multiple layers of polyurethane and the Crackle paint. So here's my multi-base now all painted up. So you can see that it added lots of colour. The tree's painted, got the little demons, the imps, as well as our unfortunate elf stuck behind the tree. And I've also added, with that elf, a little bit of blood effects. I'm interested to see how the blood effect looks underneath the ice effect when I put that down. The actual base itself, I've dry brushed, so I've done a few different hues of mainly blues. So I've got a dark blue, a light blue, that it's just dry brushed on to give that tint of blue, because I don't want to actually paint it all blue. I want it to be different and it'll just look a bit more interesting. And then I've done, I decided this time, because the last one I did all in blue, and it looks alright, but it looks kind of samey because, ice blue. So I put in a little bit of green. So the next step is to prepare your multi-base for the ice effect. So the polyurethane that I'm going to be dripping down and pouring on, obviously I don't want to go anywhere but on the base, and it needs to stay there for about It says 2 hours, but I think overnight it needs to stay still and on the base in order to fully set. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use some sticky tape. Yeah, there we go. So I'm going to get some sticky tape. This is just classic sticky tape. Rather enclosed. And then what you can do is just fold the sticky tape underneath, and that'll hopefully seal it even better. How does that look? Kind of cool? Alright. Off we go to the garage, where unfortunately we will have not as good a setup or lighting. Now we're here in my garage. I've got here all the tools required for the next step. So I have my multi-base all sticky taped up, ready to hold in the polyurethane. I have here my tub of polyurethane from the local hardware store. Here in Australia, that's Bunnings. If you're interested in what this brand is, it's Cabot's Carbothane Clear. So it dries clear, not completely clear, but good enough. You want to give it a good stir. You don't want to shake it. You don't want bubbles in this. Not at all. So give it a good stir. Once you got it to, there's no more clumps floating around, because you'll find when you first open it up, a lot will have settled at the bottom, and so you need to make sure you stir it to get it to a good consistency. But if you keep using it semi-regularly after that, it doesn't seem to settle as much. And then you want to get one of these passenger pipettes. So this is just a little 3mm passenger pipette. You don't have to. Technically, you could pour it on, but with this, I have a bit more control. I don't know where you buy these. I assume at the pharmacy and stuff, but my workplace has them, so I did take a few from the workplace. So you grab a hefty amount of the polyurethane, and you just squeeze it on like so. Those bubbles, suck them back up. There we go. Alright, I've gotten rid of all the bubbles. Polyurethane layer is nice. Just looking around the edge. Lift it up. So you can see the liquid is contained for now. It's coming up to the elf. It's covered some of the rocks. Now that little branch on the side really looks like a submerged tree, whereas before it didn't really look like anything. Oh, whoops. I held it up at an angle a bit too much and it started collecting at one side. So yeah, now we'll just leave this. We'll leave this and see how it looks, I guess, tomorrow.
24 hours later.
And so here we have it. We have about 2 layers of the polyurethane that have been laid down successively. So if you look at it from above, you can kind of see that things look slightly submerged. You can see the elf here is lying partially underneath. Now, if you wanted to make it look completely frozen under the ice, you would keep going with extra layers and keep piling it up and up, so that maybe you reach perhaps, it looks like about the second step of my little stone steps here. But I think that would probably then, I'll lose a lot of this detail, a lot of this, and I've still got to go the Crackle paint on top. So that's what I'm going to bring out next. But first, before I put the Crackle paint on, what I'm going to do, you can see that, where the polyurethane has kind of risen up against where the sticky tape was, we've kind of got this ridge, especially it kind of pushes in. So what I'm just going to do, I'm just going to use some scissors and trim that away so that it all lies a bit more flush, just so it doesn't quite look like it's so risen. But overall, I'm pretty happy with this. You can see that it's not completely clear from side on, but from above, you can still see that detail. You can see the colors that I laid down underneath, and they're coming through quite muted, but I think it looks quite nice. So the next step now is to put on the Crackle paint. So first I'll trim this away, and then I'll show you the product that I use. With the edges now trimmed, we'll move on to the Crackle paint. So this Crackle paint I keep referring to is this one, Distress Crackle Paint Clear Rock Candy. So what this does, you paint it on, it is completely clear when it dries, so unlike, say, some of the Crackle paints you might be more familiar with from, say, Games Workshop that actually dry opaque and usually have a pigment in them that makes them a certain color, such as there's the Mars one, and I've got another one that's a different kind of earth, and they're fine,
But for the cases of when you want to have something like cracked ice or any other kind of cracked clear surface, this does a great job. It gives you that texture that you can then apply a wash to show those cracks. And it does so relatively cheaply, so you get quite a lot. So I'm just going to open it up here. Just got my brush, water, and it says medium to thick coat. So let's get some of this here. Off we go. I'm going to go for
So 24 hours later.
Okay, so the Crackle paint has dried. So you can see the texture there. This is what that distressed Crackle paint has now done on top of my 2 layers of polyurethane. So it's kind of creating that cracked glacier, frozen wastes kind of look that I'm after. But obviously it's a bit hard to see these cracks in the ice. So I've got my next step to bring them out. And that's what I've prepared here. I've just made a kind of just a blue wash using a bit of acrylic paint medium as well as lots and lots of water. And just a blue paint. It was just a generic kind of blue. I think it was crystal blue from Army Painter. So I'm just going to apply this wash. You could use any wash, but I didn't want to use like a Citadel wash because, well, I'm going to use quite a bit to cover this whole base. So I'm just going to apply it like this. So we can hopefully, as I put it on, see those cracks come out. And just push it around. There we go, there's those cracks. Oop. You can see some of it came off there. That's okay. It's just that happens. So if the Crackle paint goes on a bit too thickly, what will happen is it kind of makes thicker chunks. So maybe there was an area where I painted it a bit too thick. There we go. Hopefully that looks a bit more interesting now. And I've got spots where it's accumulated. Ooh, there goes another bit. Alright, so I'll stop fiddling around. I'll just leave that like that. So the Crackle paint is coming up where I flick it with the brush too much. So yeah, be careful as you apply it. We can see now, kind of looks a bit icy. And we'll see what it looks like when it is dried. So the blue wash is now dried and it actually turned out pretty good. So what I was worried about before, some of those little clumps that formed, didn't really eventuate. They seem to have spread out, or I'm not quite sure what happened, but as I left it to dry, it just looks really good. All the cracks from the Crackle paint have really come out. You can see some of the chunks that have come off, the larger chunks, because this Crackle paint, while really good, it does tend to break off if you're not careful, especially if it dries into larger chunks. But it seems that for the most part, we've got this kind of glacial, frozen ice kind of effect. It looks like frozen ice, and all that remains now is to get a brush and dry brush it white. And there you have it, a fully multi-base unit put on to your ice base. Using all the following steps, this is the effect that you finally get. There's always tweaking that's involved. If you want the cracks to pop better, I would suggest you can use a darker glaze to put into the cracks, or wash. Glaze or wash, both works. And also, I'm going to play around with how I'm going to paint this border of the plastic card here down the bottom. I've started with this blue, but I think maybe it's a bit too, it's a royal blue from Army Painter, and I'm thinking I might just need to change it up a bit, make it a bit lighter, my wife suggested. So that's what I will try. But overall, I'm pleased with this effect. The unit looks fantastic. This is Abyssal Guard using some Old Chaos Warriors, and you can see that these Old Chaos Warriors, they are chunky, and they do not like sharing space. So even though this regiment of Abyssal Guard is supposed to hold at least 11 models easily, those models that the Abyssal Guard are normally made of are much smaller, the ones from Mantic. So these guys are a bit chunkier, so 11 seems to be the actual maximum that you can have on this multi-base. But it looks great. It looks like a really formidable
chunky unit, and that's what it's supposed to be. They're supposed to be a big bulwark. You know, they are tough, they regenerate. And I went for this kind of color scheme, just as an aside, not really to do with the base, but I went for this kind of multiple different armor colors just to really make it pop in a kind of cartoony way. Because, I mean, these models are very cartoony, so I decided to go the full kind of, Warcraft 3 route and just make them look really cartoony and, like, bright colors, and I think it has overall worked. The only unfortunate thing is all the cool stuff that I had on my base, like the little imp, here he is kind of overshadowed. He's a small part of what is a very crowded base, but lesson learned. I tried to make it very fancy, and maybe I didn't need to. But this is the approach I'll be going for my whole army. So this is 2 units down. I've got this and the flame bearers, so I will just keep on going. And maybe once I'm done, I'll do a video of the entire army. So see you in a couple months when that's done. Jeez, I mean, this took a while. But let me know if you like it, and if you have any questions, just put them in the comments below. And I'll see you next time.